Yeah, thanks for this warm welcome, Leah. And yeah, welcome to this panel on the GPAI Code of Practice and systemic risk. So AI is advancing at a breathtaking speed. I think this has been impressively demonstrated by the trajectories of AI model performance shown by Mr. Privitera earlier, but also by the many impressive use cases demonstrated live here on stage. With its progress, AI brings enormous economic and societal opportunities, but also introduces new forms of risks. And to address these very risks, while safeguarding innovation in Europe, the EU adapted the General Purpose AI Model Regulation chapter in the AIDAQ, which is the first binding and comprehensive regulatory framework for front AI models. And now, building on top of this, the Code of Practice is a voluntary instrument, really, that was drafted by a group of independent authors via a multi-stakeholder process that specifies the high-level provisions laid out in the AIDAQ. And it thereby should facilitate compliance with the AIDAQ for GPAI model providers. Having said that, I'm very excited to have this panel of experts with me to discuss the final outcome of the code and the challenges that now lie ahead with implementation. We will structure this conversation around three central topics. First, we want to put some general perspective on the final code, so particularly on the safety and security chapter, as this is the one that really addresses the systemic risks. Then we want to actually address the challenges that now lie ahead with implementation, both for GPAI model providers, but also with the AI office that is tasked with oversight of these models. And then, of course, very importantly, what will be the effect of the code on European AI competitiveness, and what will be the effect on other jurisdictions, maybe through a so-called Brussels effect. Yeah, having said that, I want to get right into it and start with my first question to you, Martin. So you at OpenAI, you're one of the largest GPAI model providers in the world. You already have quite comprehensive model evaluation, risk assessment, risk mitigation practices in place. You are also one of the first signatories of the code. Having said that, what is your final view on the code?
Well, thanks for organizing this very timely topic, because at OpenAI, when you look back, we've been for years pushing the boundaries of model capabilities and security of the models. We've seen the increasingly growing benefits of the models, but also the many risks that arise from that. And we've been pushing the boundaries on both fronts. So when we started working on the Code of Practice a year ago, collectively with the rest of this multi-stakeholder process, we had two main ambitions. The first one was to share the deep expertise we had built in safety and security to inform the very best practices that this code was trying to codify. And the second ambition we had was to achieve a framework that would have pragmatic and proportionate rules. Because it's important to have rules, it's important that they advance safety, but these rules need not to impose red tapes or to create burdens that can slow innovation. And we believe strongly that we could find the right balance. Now, fast forward, when we look at the outcome of the code, what we are seeing is that one of its main strengths is it's deeply grounded in actual practices that have been developed and refined by the industry with support from different bodies in academia, in the public authorities. And I just want to take two examples to illustrate my point here. The first one is that you have, under the security chapter of the code, the obligations to have a safety framework in place. This is something that we at OpenAI have had in place since 2023, and this is something that many others in the industry have developed over the years. Another point in this chapter is the obligation to have basically model reports that document how you implement this safety framework, how you test the models, the kind of risk you've tested, the kind of findings you've had, the mitigation you've put in place. And equally, this is something that we've championed over the past few years by releasing these, we call them system cards, to document what we are doing for model safety and security. So we are very pleased to see that the resulting code of practice was deeply grounded in actual practices, not in abstract principles. Now, in terms of challenges, what's ahead is first we need to get the implementation right. And second, what we strongly feel about is like we need to double down on adoption. Because it's one thing to have safe technology, it's important, but what's even more important is to have a safe technology that is a source of prosperity and progress for the economy and the society. So we really need, like, collectively, and governments should be in the first seat there to double down on AI uptake.
Thanks for sharing this perspective, Martin. So I now actually want to bring in your perspective, Mark. So you at the Future of Life Institute, for those of you who have not heard about the Future of Life Institute before, it's an independent tech policy think tank and NGO that has a strong focus on AI. For example, through the AI Safety Index report, they regularly invite independent academic experts to assess the risk mitigation and model evaluation practices of leading AI companies. You were also one of the very vocal voices in the stakeholder process. Having said that, I have two questions here. First, where do you actually see the largest risks associated with frontier AI models? And then, how do you actually think the code lives up to the expectation of providing practices to mitigate these?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I suppose my role on stage as coming from FLI, indeed the largest global advocacy organization in AI, is to sort of criticize or sort of nuance whatever Martin says to my right. And I think I agree with some of it. I really appreciate how OpenAI participated in our safety index, where we looked at all the companies this year, and Google did not, so I mean, kudos to OpenAI. Where do we see the biggest risks? I think we see the biggest risks where Joshua Bengio has identified them in what is called the International AI Safety Report. Can I see in the room, has anyone read the report? Could you raise your hand? Oh, this is quite good. This is about 6, 7, and thankfully the panel has read it. If you haven't read it, I can really recommend the executive summary. It takes 2 pages and 30 seconds, and it gives you a good sense, I think, of what are the key risks in AI, namely misuse. Someone might run a cyber attack on German electricity infrastructure. Malfunction, a system might pursue an objective to the cost of society, and then there's a bunch of systemic risks, like in the labor market, or our moral values might be changed because of how an AI system operates. Are we happy with how the code deals with that? Like, ish. I mean, the code picks 4 risks out of that long list. It looks at loss of control. It looks at the ability of AI to manipulate societies at scale. It looks at cyber, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. So, I mean, there are some that are picked up and taken as examples, which I think is really great. But I think in our ultimate vision, we would like the AI industry to be more like aviation, where you would prove to the regulator that your system is safe. The regulator would say, yes, the plane can fly. Yes, the AI system is safe. And only then does it get released to market, rather than saying, well, the companies have frameworks and they can sort of say that it's OK. And I think that's where the biggest difference comes in. Maybe as a final point there, I think if the nuclear industry would be sitting to my right, and they could go back in time, before 3 Mile Island and before Chernobyl, they would beg for more rules. They would say, please give us lots and lots of very, very, very strict rules. Because after 3 Mile Island, the market for US nuclear power plants was wiped out overnight. There was no demand whatsoever. This country has no nuclear power plants to speak of anymore after all the incidents and the massive backlash that arose in so many Western societies. And I think we want to avoid that for AI. And I think the perspective to say, oh, we should be sort of in the middle on rules is the wrong perspective, because if you want to have real uptake in the innovation you care about, I think you also want those guardrails to be strong enough to prevent the kind of incidents that we've seen in other very, very sensitive sectors.
Thank you. So actually now want to turn over to the German government position. And yeah, the German government has also been a stakeholder in this process in some sense. So I also want to hear from you, Evelyn. What is your view on the final code?
Thank you so much, Janis. Well, in fact, it is what has been said already to a large extent. Well, it was this huge process on a very, very relevant topic. I think we all agree on that the AI safety issue is a big issue and of key importance. We have it mentioned also in the new coalition agreement expressly that this is an issue to have a look at. So this was very important to us, that we have to address this via the code of practice, of course. But it is not so easy, actually, because there are other things which we have to bear in mind. And this is, first of all, what we have said already, also I think in the previous panels, that it is largely by big US players driven technology. So what we've seen is there are big players on the one hand, mainly in the US, and in Europe we have startups still catching up. So this was something we had to bear in mind, because complex regulation is always easier to cope with for the big ones, and might hinder our small ones. So this was very important for us as well. Then we have a fast-moving technological development. And this is not so easy to regulate, in fact. And I have never trained a model. So as you said, we were a stakeholder. We were a bit more than a stakeholder as a member state. But actually, the truth is that neither the Commission nor we as member states, nor the European Parliament have the expertise to really provide rules, good rules, so to say, which do not slow down the technology. Because as you have said, there are lots of benefits. There are risks, of course, but there are lots of benefits, and we wanted to make sure that we will have those benefits also in Europe. So for that, we argued very early for industry-driven process with a large stakeholder involvement. This was a quite intense process, sometimes tiring, and a lot of work. We really contributed actively to that process, and in the end, when the final code was provided to us, we really looked at it having in mind those aspects I've already outlined, so to say, what we see that major risks have been addressed, that is overall a balanced code. Germany agreed to the AI board's adequacy assessment, which the AI board needed to issue, together with an overwhelming majority of member states. And what was important for us, particularly that it was practice-oriented, the code of practice, that it kept in mind the special situation of startups. For example, you have alleviations there for startups. It really narrowed down the number of commitments, also in the safety and security chapters, to 10 commitments. And so it was streamlined, and it is not designed in a way that would disincentivize investment and development of AI models in Europe. So this was very important for us, but in the end, we were quite glad that this process worked out well. And we have a code of practice now because it makes it much easier for model providers to provide compliance with the AI Act, but also for downstream industry to get the information they need to fulfill their obligations. So that's all I can say for now. Thank you.
Thanks. I think downstream is actually a very good keyword, and hereby introducing you, Kirsten. So you are actually advising downstream providers on implementing AI governance frameworks. And yeah, many of these downstream providers will integrate GPAI models also with systemic risk in their downstream applications. Of those downstream applications, we will have probably a large share also of high-risk applications, which themselves then have to comply with risk management, with transparency, with cybersecurity obligations. Having this in mind, what is your view how, at least indirectly, the code will affect the downstream value chain?
Yeah, to be honest, I wish it would influence it more. I mean, it's great that we have it, and I think we've also been part of the process as a stakeholder, as a downstream provider ourselves, and everybody, I think, made a deep sigh when finally the paper was there. Having said that, it wasn't a very industry-driven process at all, and we were one of 7% of real industry downstream providers that were part of that process, and that voice. If you think about it, GPAI models are the brick and mortar and steel and concrete of our times. They are the raw materials of our times that you actually build applications with that then have a societal impact and that then maybe provide societal risk. It's not the model itself. The model itself is agnostic, and it also isn't the provider itself. And I'm glad that they provide now all of these information, but if you build a car, you would want to know that the steel you build it from is actually of high quality. And that's why I also don't like the airline example, because actually OpenAI to me isn't Airbus. They're actually the people that provide the materials to build the Airbus. And the people that build the Airbus together then need to know that their material is safe. And I think this is how we need to see the raw materials of our times, which is AI. And I'm glad we have the code of practice now, but I don't think that many downstream providers, A, know that it exists, B, know how to handle it, and 3, know that this is a real good tool for them to actually get rid of one of the barriers of implementation of AI, which is risk. And risk management is the biggest hurdle currently for companies to actually take these models and put them at the heart of value creation. If you look at implementation these days of AI and adoption, it's mainly in writing better emails, it's mainly in like making mundane tasks a lot more enjoyable, and I'm glad for that. But if we really want to do value creation with AI, we really need to put these models at the heart of value creation. And I don't think that many downstream providers have grasped that. And I wish, as much as I think that the code is a good piece of work that's come out of a multi-stakeholder process that was quite intense, I think now it's time to actually work with it. It needs to be a living, breathing document. And when I look at maybe how the Commission, but also other stakeholders think about it, it's a bit like we're still treating AI regulation like we're regulating a toaster or something like that. We have now this paper and it's great, but it isn't really something that's super practical, and it certainly isn't currently used like we would use a certificate or a risk management system for steel or concrete as the foundation of really big societal problems.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this perfectly makes us moving over to implementation perspective. And here I actually wanted to follow up with you, Kirsten. What do you think are now, like, what is key to get implementation right? So the code and maybe also general the AI Act rather promotes innovation and does not hinder it?
Yeah, I think these are two questions actually. So I worked with, I think, since I switched from government, with about 800 companies across Europe, and small and medium enterprises, but also large enterprises. And I think we have a real communication problem around AI regulation. I think we have a real communication problem about who it actually focuses on and pertains to and applies to, and how it is actually implemented. I've yet to meet someone in industry that says, oh, we don't want any rules, or we're not looking for a really good practical AI risk management system. Quite the contrary, to be honest. I mean, most, especially systemically relevant players, banking industry, insurance, but also like physical AI users, like the car industry, chemical industry, really want risk management systems, and the AI Act is a really good blueprint for that. Having said that, when I speak to my clients about the code of practice, 9 out of 10 will not have heard about it, and the 10th person is probably just very polite to me and, and says, yes, you did good, right? So I think we need a much broader, actually very practical discussion of, okay, how can you use this? Why is this relevant for you? You know, what's all the data that OpenAI and others provide what does it actually mean to you? And I don't think everyone needs to be a data scientist to understand. I think the information given by the code providers is valid and good and can be understood and absorbed, but you need to find it, and you need to know how to use the template. And there, I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thanks. Yeah, let's now hear actually the GPAI model provider's perspective on implementation. So, right, the code requires you to choose state-of-the-art methods on risk modeling, on model evaluations. How will you now make sure that your implementation reflects this? What are your key considerations for implementing the code now?
So there are a couple of challenges ahead. The first one you rightly mentioned is adaptability. This is something we've talked about. The technology is moving really fast, And fortunately, there are several references to like state-of-the-art methods, stuff like that, that basically allow for some flexibility in like the way we are going to address these risks and tackle them. So this is really important. And when you look back, this is already the kind of like ways we are addressing these risks. I mentioned the safety protocol we have in place. We established it in 2023. And earlier this year, we updated it to reflect the latest state of the art, to basically reflect on like the evolution of the AI safety science, to make sure that it was informed by the latest practices. So this needs to be really dynamic. Then there are two challenges that are that will need more cooperation with the regulator, with the government, and other stuff. The first one is something we've constantly advocated for, is that the regulation needs to be focused on like the most advanced model. The GPAI Code of Practice, and especially the security chapter, is really designed to capture the frontier models. Currently, frontier models under the AIDAQ are captured by a compute threshold, and there are many voices, a compute threshold that was agreed upon over 2 years ago, and many voices, the chairs that wrote the Code of Practice, some member states, France, maybe Germany, I'm not even sure, are advocating for revising this threshold. Basically making sure that this threshold, the threshold that designates the kind of models that are captured, is still up to date and still focused on like the most advanced model. So that's a second point, like the number of models in scope and the scope of the code itself. And the third point, I think, is something that we kind of discussed in the first round, is what is going to be the role of public authorities, of the AI office, and other bodies in like advancing a thoughtful regulation that knows about the risks? As Evelyn mentioned, there is this question. These questions are deeply technical. They need to have like some solid like scientific knowledge, expertise, and here we are faced in a situation where we have the AI office that has like a triple role. It's like a legislator, it's part of the European Commission that writes the rules, it's the regulator in charge of enforcing the rules, and it's the AI safety of the European Union that wants to think about like long-term of the safety dimensions of AI. And when we compare with what we are doing, for example, with the UK Security Institute, what we are doing with the US Center for AI Standards, we've been partnering with these two institutions for years now. We have partnership in place to basically advance the security of our models, to think together hand in hand as sparring partner to advance the science of safety. We actually published an article, if you're interested about that, last week to explain what we had done with these two institutions. With these two institutions, because they are not regulators, we can have a much more candid conversation, a much more open dialogue. We can like bring in our doubts, what the flaws are in our models, to perfect that and build stronger guardrails. So when it comes to the AFIs, because of this triple role, we need to find what is going to be the exact relation to make sure that we can collectively, jointly advance the state of AI science and AI safety in Europe.
Thanks. I think now you were already preempting some of the questions I had for Ms. Rass. But like I will pose them still. So yeah, how is your view, Evelyn, on the triple role of the AI office, the Martin just described, but also what is your expectation now for the coordination of the AI office now with member states on the many issues that they both are, of course, concerned with? For example, those that touch upon model and system requirements, such as AI agents.
Happy to answer this one. Of course, the AI office was, so to speak, the facilitator of the Code of Practice process. Just to say a word there, I think it is not the overall objective to the regulation to impose sanctions in the end. The objective is to ensure AI safety and, on the other hand, foster innovation in Europe. And the AI office has made it very clear after the adequacy decision by the Commission that they offer to work collaboratively with the AI model providers to ensure compliance. It's a kind of phase-in period which we are about to see now to ensure compliance. We all know, and we managed it. The Code of Practice was a little late. So now we have 1 year until the rules are that firm that sanctions could be imposed, and this year will be used for phasing in and ensuring compliance. And when it comes to the cooperation between the member states and the AI office, I really have to say that we have a close cooperation. It is very fruitful. At the ministerial level already, we are meeting in the AI board. So we are exchanging views, and the AI office, the safety unit there, regularly reports, for example, on the recent technological developments and the risk assessment thereon. When it comes to the surveillance authorities, they had to be nominated by the member states. Till August, we are a little late there. But anyway, we have already in place the Federal Network Agency, which is allowed to do some preparatory work here. And of course, the Federal Network Agency is already participating also in the AI board subgroups with us, aligning with the AI office. And in autumn, the specific subgroups on market surveillance and notifying authorities will start. So these are fora to really closely work together, to exchange views on technical issues, on legal views, because we want to have a uniform interpretation of the AI Act throughout the European Union, of course. And when it comes to the competencies, you have normally the AI office, which is in the lead for AI models and national authorities for AI systems. But of course, when you have AI agents, you have a bit of both. So there will be a need for close cooperation, and I'm pretty sure that we will get it right. And just one last sentence. Cooperations among authorities is really the most important thing I'm seeing when implementing the AI Act and doing AI regulation. Because AI really is an issue which tackles lots of fields. So we have data protection there, we have cybersecurity, and so the most challenging issue for us is to really get those relevant authorities, to bring them together and to have smooth and good cooperation. And we are really working on that, and I'm quite confident that we are doing so. Thank you.
Great, that's good to hear. And like adding to this, Mark, I actually am curious. So the code leaves arguably some room for GPAI providers to choose the methods and the approaches to comply with the commitments and measures out there. And this arguably also raises the bar for the AI office to effectively perform its role. So what is your view on the question, what capabilities and resources the AI office actually needs to effectively perform its role?
I agree with Martin for change that we need staff, I think, at the AI office. The safety unit at the EU AI offices will have, hopefully, 40 people by the end of the year. The United Kingdom already has 200 people dedicatedly working on safety. The UK is a lot smaller than the whole European Union. There's 3 great Germans in the EU AI office. That's about it. Like, that is most of the expertise that has been brought in. And I think most member states look to the EU for that expertise, so there just needs to be a lot more budget, and perhaps that's something Germany can nudge for in the next sort of 7-year budget cycle, make sure that the EU AI office has some money to do its job. But I think the more important thing is that the member states, I think as Evelyn rightfully said, cooperate on AI policy. Like, I would encourage Germany to think of itself more as the Netherlands than as a G7 big power in AI, as a smaller country, because unfortunately that is what we are faced with, I think, as Europe. We are all very, very small and irrelevant in the global AI dynamic. And the only way that that's going to change is when European countries work together. So I can't disagree more with the State Secretary who was just on before, who was like, we need a German gigafactory. Well, I think it is better to try and take a European perspective on what we may need and make sure that we don't make the same mistake as we did with cloud, where, in a sense, we really tried very hard to make European cloud providers, but we failed. And I think the only way to do this better this time around is really try and make sure how do we avoid all this nationalism around AI and make sure that there is a sort of European approach where the Commission and the AI Office really have an opportunity to succeed. And I think currently there are too many headlines about member states wanting to tinker a little bit around the edges of the EU AI Office, or the EU AI Act. Do we change a threshold? Do we do a little bit here? But we shouldn't forget that there was no really big EU AI company before the AI Act was created or even thought of or brought into force. Like, the AI Act is irrelevant, I would say, to whether or not Europe will build its own AI capacity. There are other things that are way more important, like, is there access to capital? What are the bankruptcy laws? Today, all the European hospitals said it's really unclear when a doctor uses an AI system, are they liable? Or is OpenAI liable if they feed it through ChatGPT? And one of the things that I think we did, which was really dumb, was we withdrew the liability directive at the European level to try and reduce regulation. When I think to push innovation and to push growth, I think you also need clarity around who's responsible when. So I think there's a lot more that the EU AI Office can do, yes, but I think it's first up to the member states to make sure that they think more on a European level and less in a sort of nationalistic way, which I think is going to be insufficient.
Thanks, Mark. So this transitions us already to our last section on actually the competitiveness and also the effect of the code on other jurisdictions. I need here a very quick round as we are already way ahead in time. But I want to ask you first, Martin, how much of a Brussels effect do you hope for and anticipate through the code of practice?
So I think there are two dimensions that are extremely important. First is harmonization. We touched upon the harmonization within the EU, but it's also important to have convergence at international level. We need to have less fragmentation. Fragmentation is detrimental to the smallest players. It's detrimental to the startups that are trying to scale up. It's detrimental to the companies that are established and trying to go abroad and develop. And we need urgently, and this is the task of government, to foster cooperation not only among member states, but also with other jurisdictions. We've had a year back safety institutes meeting in SF in San Francisco to discuss a roadmap. Yes, they set a very high-level roadmap. I haven't heard about that going forward. And we clearly see from the work we are doing with the UK Security Institute and US Center for AI Standards that there is benefit from the industry perspective in advancing the cooperation with this body. So we need harmonization. And there is a version of that at play when we hear about the simplification debate here in Europe. When you actually listen to what people are asking, they are not necessarily asking for less rules. They are asking for consistency between the rules. They are asking for harmonization between the rules. There was a reality check session yesterday in Brussels about cyber rules, and people were asking one-stop shop. We have too many authorities to report to. So it's just a question of not less rules, but consistent and harmonized rules for the benefits of everybody. And the second thing on competitiveness that is extremely important, and I talked about it already, we need to double down on adoption and AI uptake. You need to have government empowering people to have the right skills, supporting organizations to reskill and upskill their people, to foster adoption for SMEs, for all sectors. You need to invest in the availability of data and compute. This is what's needed, and this needs to happen with a strategic vision at EU level, with how it trickled down in member states to avoid what Mark was saying about nationalism and basically competition that is not necessarily the most fruitful for Europe at the end. I'll stop here.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll give it over to you, Evelyn, very quickly. You're also in contact with AI policymakers outside of the European Union. What is your view? How much inspiration is there through the code to be expected?
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps first of all, it is not that I think the European Union does regulation to create a kind of Brussels effect. I think this is done when you see a need for regulation. But anyway, we have now these rules regarding general purpose AI models, and we have the Code of Practice, and indeed, it is of great interest. We are having lots of different channels of exchange with other countries, and we are now consistently asked on these rules and how we got there and how they are implemented in practice, things like this. And this is overall. This is Asia, for example, but also I'm the vice chair of the Artificial Intelligence Working Group in the OECD, the OECD partners, for example. So they are all interested indeed on this scheme. And I would but fully agree what Martin just said. It is really important that we keep this dialogue to align ourselves with other instruments, and of course we are happy to contribute. For example, when it comes to the Hiroshima Code of Conduct, the G7 Code of Conduct, and the reporting framework, we are actively contributing within the OECD, also providing our expertise from this exercise during the Code of Practice.
Thanks. Yeah, and now with a look on time, we actually need a very quick round. So for Mark and Kirsten, just very quickly, also your perspective, how will the code in your perspective shape global AI governance?
I'll be super brief. I think California has an AI bill at the governor's desk now since last week. New York does as well. There's an upcoming one in Brazil next month where there will be a big conference. All of these take inspiration from the AI Act. So I think there is an emerging effect in parts of the AI Act, and if we can help it, I hope it's stronger.
Thanks, that was concise, yeah. Maybe adding to this very quickly.
I'm going to end with an unpopular opinion. I'm so bored with these European competitiveness discussions by now. I think it's been a year and a half since we're discussing this, but actually I've yet to see a company to make really like a P&L, like a money-making difference with AI, except the ones that sell it. And I think we're having this huge discussion about, uploading the AI office with a lot of responsibilities and then talking about all of the papers, etc. I would really want to actually see the impact of AI much more in the market with actual companies and products that we sell here in Europe, and then competitiveness will come. And I do believe that the Code of Practice and the AI Act actually contribute to that and don't hinder it, because actually they give these models what they don't have, which is consistency, which is actually accuracy, which is cybersecurity. And I see that around the world happening and copycatting the AI, our AI risk management. And I'm a bit bored by us always discussing European competitiveness and that it, of course there's a point to be made that there's a lot of bureaucracy, but actually I think there's a missing feedback loop here between European industry and European policymakers, and that feedback loop, improving that, will certainly help a lot with both implementing the rules that we have made, that are the right rules, I strongly believe, but also making us a lot more sovereign and making us a lot more stand up towards the 5, 6, 7 companies now that are non-European and that we're currently depending on. Just imagine the AI office whitelisting certain models on certain conditions or not, and giving the whole of the European industry power about that. And I know that a lot of discussions are happening with member states, but I also know that from previous times that sometimes things get lost in policy discussions, but could be much better driven by the private sector. So I hope that the Code of Practice is actually a private sector tool, much more than a policy tool. And I wish that the next 1,000 days of generative AI would actually bring some value creation, and that we can then shape our continent and our competitiveness through that, much more than about through discussions on bureaucracy and too much bureaucracy and too many policymakers and what they can and cannot do.
I think there was already quite a closing player. And yeah, with that we are at the end. Thank you very much for this enriching discussion, and I think we will not have heard the last of the code, and maybe updates ahead, we will see. Yeah, well, it was great fun, and with that I give it back to you, Leah.
And there is a new code starting.
Yeah, right.